Hey, good evening, everyone. John Henry Soto here, along with George Batista. Welcome to Counterparts. Holy cow. George and I have been saying holy cow for about a week and a half now. Steve Smith is on the show tonight, legendary drummer, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Vital Information, Journey. I mean, we are going to have an amazing conversation. Please hang out while we listen to a little tune. All righty. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate it. As I said, Steve Smith is on the show tonight. We're very excited. I don't want to, you know how I go, George. I start talking and I won't shut up. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. Let's give some love to one of our sponsors, and then let's just get the show on the road.
Absolutely. Well, the Counterpart Show is brought to you by Wellness Resources, a family-owned and operated nutritional supplement company providing the highest quality, clinically formulated supplements since 1985. Find out why Wellness Resources supplements are the top choice of health-conscious individuals around the world. Make sure you go to myvitaminresource.com, and if you enter the promo code Counterparts, you will get free shipping on all orders. So check it out. All right.
Sweet.
So, John, I'm very, very excited today. We have Mr. Steve Smith on the show, and just a little bit about Steve. I can go on and on about him, but just a little bit about him. He's an American drummer, well known for being a member of the rock band Journey across 3 tenures. As a session musician, he has worked with notable artists such as Mariah Carey, Andrea Bocelli, Savage Garden, Jean-Luc Ponty, and Bryan Adams, just to name a few. Steve has also had tremendous success leading his own jazz fusion group called Vital Information. He's recorded many albums with them. Modern Drummer magazine readers have voted him the #1 all-around drummer 5 years in a row. In 2001, the publication named Smith one of the top 25 drummers of all time. And in 2002, he was voted into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame. On top of that, in 2017, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Journey. And John, this is absolutely exciting for us to be, and it's an honor to have him on. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Steve Smith.
Ooh.
All right.
Right.
Hey, George. Hi, John. Good to be here.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. As we were saying, George and I are like kids in a candy store when we're having these conversations with just incredibly talented people, but also giving of their art. That's really, really important for us to know that there are artists out there at that caliber that are willing to give so much of themselves, of their talent, and of their time. So we really appreciate it. Gracias.
Yes.
My pleasure. All right.
Yeah. So thank you.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, we want to talk about a lot of things, but because we don't want to keep you here for like 10 hours, we're gonna pick some of the cream of the crop. I'm gonna actually turn it over to George, and George will get the ball rolling with some questions, and then we'll get started.
Absolutely. So just I've learned a lot about you in the past few years. I know you started playing very early on. I think it was around the age of 9, actually, where you picked up the sticks, and you've been playing ever since. And I know that, just like for me, when I was younger, people like Neil Peart and John Bonham, those guys were my heavy influences. And when I saw these guys and heard these guys play, I was like, I couldn't believe that human beings can actually play that way, and completely changed my life. And I know for you, I know you grew up on big band, but then you also saw people like Billy Cobham and Tony Williams play and completely changed your life. What did they do for you as far as just inspiration?
Well, to jump back to when I did start at 9 years old, I started with formal lessons, like weekly private lessons, and they were based on just learning the drum rudiments, learning how to read music, and actually just starting out on a practice pad. And I bring that up because a lot of times people start drumming, and they get a whole drum set and start playing the whole drum set.
Right.
Interesting.
And the way that I started, in some ways, was typical from an earlier time. So it was 1963 when I did that, when I started. And the teacher that I had was an old big band drummer. And so he had me just, reading, playing rudiments, learning stick control. And then eventually, after 2 years of that, I got a snare drum. So I got into, then snare drum set. And then when I started playing the drum set, finally 3 years into it, I started with the ride cymbal beat, the jazz ride cymbal beat, and independence coordination. So it was, in today's world, I would say it was a very traditional way of learning, traditional from an earlier time. So the orientation being big band, of course, the king of the hill was Buddy Rich.
Yeah, of course.
As a incredible drummer, but especially he was touring with this big band. And growing up in the Boston area, luckily I got to see him a lot. So I'm giving you just like an orientation. So I was really acclimated to seeing big bands, to see Buddy Rich. I loved all the big bands and saw, Stan Kenton.
Right.
And interestingly enough, Peter Erskine was playing drums with Stan Kenton, and he was 18 and I was 18.
Oh, wow.
So he kind of blew my mind when I first saw him, that, this young guy my age was doing that, was playing on tour with a big band. And then Woody Herman and Maynard Ferguson's band. And so that was, my orientation. I did go to the Berklee College of Music in 1972 after I graduated high school. And that was the beginning of the jazz rock period.
Right.
So you had musicians that were really the forefront of jazz. They were jazz musicians, but they were playing with a rock kind of sound and attitude. That was just starting to happen at that time. So it was that was very influential for me, because it was like the sound of the generation that I grew up with, I would say. And I did, I told you that I saw Billy Cobham in 1974. So I had heard Billy Cobham with the Mahavishnu Orchestra on recordings. Right. And they made their recordings from 71 to 73. And then Billy Cobham left the band and started his own group, which I saw in 1974. So that was kind of a mind-blowing game changer to see him at that time. And I saw him in a little club in Boston that was called Paul's Mall, and probably seated about 200 people. And so if you can, think about when I saw Buddy Rich and most of the big band drummers, their setup was like a single bass drum and a rack tom, 2 floor toms, and ride cymbal and a couple of crashes. So, but you walk in and you saw Billy Cobham, and he actually pretty much had a drum set like this. Bass drums, 3 rack toms, 3 floor tom, cymbals, all over the place. Like people used to say, it looked like the front window of Manny's music.
Right.
But the way he played it was also unprecedented. So for me, he was the first drummer that I ever saw that was a match grip. Also. So I'd seen match grip before, but everyone played traditional.
Yeah.
So it was unusual for me to see match grip, and really it was just like seeing a lot of the 60s rock drummers on the Ed Sullivan show. That was like, whoa, what's that? It looked weird to me. It didn't look right, but Billy Cobham played match grip. And he was an incredible virtuoso, and he played open-handed.
Yeah.
And meaning he didn't play
crossover
here in this, he just played the hi-hat. Where is it? With the left hand.
Right, exactly.
And then he had his China cymbal upside down. It was bizarre to me, because
on purpose.
And it all worked into, and his chops were just absolutely unbelievable.
Wow.
So there was that was pretty mind-blowing. And then about a year later, in the little club next door, which is called the Jazz Workshop, I saw Tony Williams play with his group called the New Tony Williams Lifetime, with Alan Holdsworth, Alan Pasqua, Tony Newton. And it was a similar kind of mind-blowing experience, because these drummers were playing jazz, but they were playing it with this rock sound and attitude. So that had a big impact on me. So I think, then there was Lenny White,
of course,
sure. And Alphonse Mouzon with Larry Coryell's group, and then I saw Mike Clark with the Headhunters, and Dave Garibaldi with Tower of Powers. So there was, like, I had grown up with the jazz guys that were playing very straight ahead, but these guys were taking that ability and then mixing it up with the more rock and R&B, funk, a little bit of like Latin, so fusion. It is just everything, like all kinds of the styles of U.S. music put into one. So in a way, that became more my concept, and then I think I can do a lot of different things, but in a way, that was the main thing that I got into at that time.
So you mentioned earlier, you said the sound of a generation, which I love those words, because it's such an important thing to understand that this was not existing at a certain point, not that long early, from that earlier than that. And then suddenly these artists were coming together and infusing whatever they brought into this. And that was the sound of the generation. And we look at the music today and where it's moving. And, do you, since that point, have you found another moment in time where you thought this is kind of happening again, like another sound of a generation kind of taking another metamorphosis of some type?
Not as profound as what happened at that time.
Right.
There was, and I'm in the time I mean is like, say, the mid 60s, into the mid 70s, kind of this.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about a 15-year window of like where.
And I think because you had young musicians playing jazz, but they could appreciate the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Boys, and then Jimi Hendrix and Cream and Led Zeppelin. They could appreciate all that music as well as, as much as they could appreciate earlier Miles Davis and John Coltrane, because even Miles Davis himself, when started following a direction like that, and then pretty much everyone that played with Miles Davis started their own band on this cutting edge of jazz rock fusion. So in my mind, in those years, I wasn't seeing it as a separate music from jazz. I was just seeing it as the modern way to play jazz.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
It's the cutting edge of jazz.
Wow.
And it's in the present day, it's like people see it a little different. They see it as a branch off a tree.
Yeah.
And then there were some people that stayed more like in the center of what jazz was earlier. So there's lots of variations and lots of different concepts out there. I think lately, and I say lately, maybe in the last 15 or 20 years, I've been involved in, and I see a lot of Indian influence coming into jazz.
Oh.
That's something like Indian rhythms, and then some musicians that are even like bringing some of the ragas. And of course, Mahavishnu had that.
Yeah.
And then Shakti had that. And those were bands, the John McLaughlin bands from the early and mid 70s, but it's coming a little bit more prominent now. It's not like a huge thing, but it is definitely bringing some new information into the jazz world, melodically and rhythmically.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Buddy Rich, because I see, you're both drummers, so you're seeing something that I'm not seeing. I'm seeing amazing rhythms. I'm seeing speed. I'm seeing, the playfulness of the whole thing. Would you say he was the best?
I would say yes. I don't think there's really any doubt about it.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, he had a virtuosic ability that I don't think has been matched.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like he didn't go about it with,
Right.
as far as I can tell, with lots of study and in practice. It was pretty much a natural gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he grew up at a time in an environment that he could hear some of the greatest drummers at that time, and somehow he was able to intuit how to do that, and physically he could do it. And I know I've heard you guys on your last show, you were talking about Neil Peart and Gruber. Now Freddie Gruber was a very close friend of Buddy Rich's, and Freddie Gruber had incredibly great powers of insight. Like, he could watch somebody play and he'd know so much about their technique and their background. Like, he was like a coach that could watch a player and think, okay, he's got this and this and this, but he could use use the direction. But he told me that he thought like Buddy was like an extremely gifted athlete. Applied to the drums.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
His abilities to the drums and almost will himself to play certain things.
Right.
Amazing.
The old videos, it's never ceases to blow my mind when I watch some of that.
Yeah.
But it's also, I have to say, it's not just what made him really a great musician and drummer overall is not just the speed and the chops and the soloing, but he really was a great accompanist. He knew how to play with other musicians. He knew how to support them. And when you saw his band, he featured the guys in his band a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Featured the arrangers that were writing the charts for him. So and then he would feature himself with usually at the end of each set, like a big extended solo.
Right.
But, he was a great musician. And if you really dig into his catalog, you'll find that he's on some great records that you would never know it was him. Like there's an album with Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. That's a really great record. Just the two of them together. And it's Ray Brown on bass and Oscar Peterson on piano and Buddy Rich on drums, just playing, like brushes. And there's a couple records like that, where he just was hired for the session and came in and did his part. And you never know it was Buddy Rich.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
That's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that about him was that he was just an all-around entertainer, right? Because he also could sing, he could dance, he could pretty much do it all,
funny.
And he was funny. Yeah, he was a funny, obviously, being on Carson and all these different places. And one of the things about you that I really admire as well, because I think that gets a little lost sometimes with drummers, is that you entertain when you play. And I like the fact that you sometimes you twirl the sticks and you hit the sticks together, and you have this entertainment part of it also that makes it very, very interesting. So, was that just something that you just decided I'm going to be entertaining as well? Is just, how did that come about?
That's a good question. I think that developed naturally, knowing that I had my own band.
Right.
And it's hard being a drummer and being a band leader. It's not the most natural instrument to be a band, play the drums and be a band leader, but it's been done, like Buddy Rich, like Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and Jack DeJohnette has had bands. Lots of drummers have had bands, and I saw them, and the ones that appealed to me the most were the ones that were also entertaining, like Max Roach. Like I would see Max Roach play with his band, and it was entertaining. But actually, I saw Max Roach a few times play solo drum set concerts.
Wow.
He would play like for an hour just by himself.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and that was entertaining because he did things like he played Mr. Hi-Hat. Now, if you saw me, maybe I did that. He'd just take a hi-hat down to the stage, and that's, I saw Max Roach do that, so I wanted to learn how to do that. He'd take a snare drum to the front of the stage and just play snare drum.
Wow.
And so that's kind of entertaining, right?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
the hold of, always behind the kit. And it's one of the reasons why I set my drum set up sideways in the front of the stage, so people could see what I was doing.
Yeah.
Versus just with the bass drum facing the audience, where that way that's a typical setup, but the audience can't always see what you're doing.
Right.
You know, you got videos and stuff like that, but in the case of mostly where I play is clubs, small clubs. So the best way for the audience to see me is with that sideways drum set. So it's just, and I'm having fun, and I want to share that fun.
It definitely looks it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have about a lot of pictures of George like this.
Yeah, because the drummer's always, I'm always obviously behind in the back with things covering.
Sorry, George. Here's the only picture I have of you.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the journey. Not so much the drumming, but that decision, that choice that you say, I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do. That moment where you decided, I don't want to do anything else but this. Do you remember? Did you make a choice like that, or was it a gradual thing?
That was a gradual thing. That the more I played drums and the more I got into it, it became my identity. In a way, I just saw myself as a drummer. I saw myself as a musician, and I never considered doing anything else. So in that way, I feel pretty fortunate that I had that, because by the time I was in high school, and then I knew, okay, I'm going to take my college prep course,
Right.
Because I knew I wanted to go to college, but I knew I wanted to go to music college.
Right.
And so I never considered not doing it.
Right. So you never thought of becoming an accountant or anything like that?
What's your
history? So anything was okay, maybe a history teacher or something, but I just incorporated music history.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. There you go.
Exactly.
Did you have a supportive family?
I did.
Okay, good.
So I grew up, like I said, near the town's called Whitman, and it's near Brockton. That's the nearest big town, and it's 25 miles south of Boston. Actually, about 8 miles from the Zildjian factory.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Pretty close to that area. My parents, my mom and dad, were extremely supportive. My mom had a passion for drumming, and I do think that there was some Gene Krupa records in the house, and so I heard that, and then my dad found my drum teacher because he had a little drum shop right near where my dad worked in Brockton at the newspaper, the Brockton Enterprise, and so they were super supportive.
Wow, that's great, because drums are generally not the ones that get the most support in the
That's
house.
true.
Like I said, I did start with the practice pad, but when I finally did get the drum set, then I was in the basement for a while, but that kind of rattles the whole house, and my dad had a tool shed in the back, so that's where I ended up. So that was fine. That was a good way to do it. Just go up to the shed in the back and put in some practice time.
Wow.
Now, you said you had started with the practice pad. That sounds like it almost sounds rational to start that way, because today you're like George, for instance. We just he just went out and bought a big drum set, and he figured it out. But it seems like the rudiments and all the fundamentals are really within here first, and then you can build out. Do you recommend anyone that's starting out, to start that way?
I personally, from my own experience, feel like it's a great way to do it.
Mhm.
Right.
And the reason is if you get a whole drum set to start with, you'll start off by playing beats.
Right.
Now it's different for everyone, you know,
Right.
and that might really work for some people.
Right.
But if you start off by playing beats, then your right hand is just going to go like, you know, play the hi-hat or the cymbal and just play eighth notes, let's say.
Right.
And then the back beat is with the left hand. Your left hand is just going to play like 2 and 4.
Right.
You know, so you, unless you decide, okay, I'm going to really work on my hand technique, you never really get around to it.
That's true. That's very true.
And so, you know, with my orientation, it was let's work on the hand technique at first and get that going. And then we're going to add these other instruments, you know, and make up a whole drum set. I think it'd be really hard to get young folks.
Yeah. Well, and it's tough also.
George did it though.
I did it, but it's, you know, because I kind of fell into the trap, and a lot of drummers, I'm sure, fall into the trap where you see your favorite drummer just wailing on their kits. So your first thing is get the kit and just follow them, right? Yeah. And then and what happened to me is I ended up so chops oriented, you know, and fill oriented in the beginning because I wanted to be Neil Peart, I wanted to be John Bonham and those guys, and I had to kind of go backwards and say, okay, well, you know what, you need to learn how to play some good time first before you go crazy doing this. So I had to kind of reverse engineer it type thing and then learn the rudiments and all that. So I kind of did it backwards. But a lot of drummers I know that fall into that because they want to be that person, right?
Yeah.
Well, you want to have the ability to play the ideas that come to you,
right?
And have a lot of headroom with your ideas. In other words, you don't want to be at your top speed, let's say,
right? And
just be able to play like kind of basic stuff.
Right.
You want the basic stuff to be there, but for it to be super easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you know, it's like having a car with a big engine.
Right.
But you still have to drive 65, you know.
Right.
Exactly.
A lot of headroom.
Right.
You can do a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
and it'll be easy.
Yeah.
You know, so and if it's easy, you can make it feel good.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. But if you're on the edge of your technique, it's probably you're going to struggle with the feel.
Yes.
And the
absolutely.
And the rest of it. So it's a good reason is to have good chops is so you can relax and then allow the creativity to happen.
Right. Use the tools because you already have them. You don't have to worry. It's like it's like learning how to speak, really. You know, you learn the words, learn the alphabet, and then you could have a conversation. Then you can write a book. You know,
right? Exactly.
Have a large vocabulary.
Right.
That's it.
All the time.
Exactly. So I want to thank you because you were kind enough to send George and I these amazing CDs. This is a New York City edition. I'm going to get to and this is the best of.
Yes.
Right there, signed. And this comes out in 2 days.
That's right.
And I want you to tell us a little bit about this because this is the complete Columbia recordings, and this goes back to I think you said 83.
Yeah. So
yeah, there you go.
So yeah, in 1983, this album came out, which is first Vital Information album.
I'll do that too.
Yeah. And, so I had, as I described, grew up, mainly being interested in jazz and jazz rock, and one thing led to another, and I ended up, being asked to be the drummer in Journey. So that was a very interesting opportunity. I found the music interesting, and the whole situation was quite interesting. And I made a lot of records with Journey, starting with Evolution, Departure, captured an escape and frontiers. And at that point, I had been with the band long enough that Columbia allowed me to do a solo record.
Nice.
You know, and so the other guys, like Neil did a record with Jan Hammer, Steve Perry went out and did a solo record, and I wanted to do my own record, and that became Vital Information.
Okay.
Because I had some good friends that I knew from college. Actually, I knew two of the members of the early Vital Information band from high school, Tim Landers and Dave Wilczewski. We played together in our high school years. And then I went to Berklee and I met Mike Stern and Dean Brown, and that became that first Vital Information.
Wow.
And so in '83, we went into a studio in Rhode Island and recorded that first record. January '83. Then the most of that year, I went on tour with Journey, playing the music from Frontiers, which was a record that came out that year. And once that tour was over, I did like a 2-month tour with my band, the first tour of Vital Information. So that's coming up.
Wow.
That's going to be 40 years next year. And then I came back from tour, made the album called Orion, and then in the next 2 years I made Global Beat and Fia Fiaga. So those records came out at a time. The first two, they were only on vinyl and cassette, and the Global Beat and Fia Fiaga came out on vinyl, cassette, and CD. But in those days, you did a mastering based on your vinyl and the limitations of vinyl. So if they put that master onto a CD, that didn't necessarily sound good because it wasn't mastered for CD.
Right.
So I guess what Wounded Bird Records is putting this out, it's called the Complete Vital Information, the Complete Columbia Recordings. Official release date is July 1st. And when Wounded Bird asked me if I would want to do this, of course, they have to license the music from Sony Music, which now owns that Columbia catalog. I went through my storage unit and I found original 1/4-inch masters of each record. But the good part is they were not mastered. They were just the songs.
Wow.
Of the songs, but not mastered. So I had each one of these albums is newly mastered.
Wow.
By great engineer Jim Brick, who from Absolute Audio in New Jersey did an outstanding job mastering these 4 albums for CD only. So this is a CD only release. And CDs, they sound really better to me than any of the original releases in any form, whether it was, vinyl or cassette. So yeah, I'm pretty excited that
these are
coming out.
They're great. So you somehow, what you found wasn't mastered. It was actually the individual tracks you just had.
Well, what it was is when you finish a recording, you put all like 8 songs or 10 songs, whatever it is, onto a 1/4-inch reel, then send that to the mastering guy. And but what I still had was what they called safety copies.
Oh, okay.
So you make a duplicate of that, and I just kept it. And I was like, what am I ever going to do with this?
This?
Yeah. 40 years later, I found a use for it.
Yeah, finally.
But those tapes were so old, you had to go through a process,
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Take them, and then they put them onto digital, and then they work in the digital realm. But
yeah, that's so great. Well, yeah, I this actually arrived today. I went to the mailbox. I pulled out the envelope. I was like, yay! So I'm going to be playing this a lot. So thank you so much for that. So are you going to be? I mean, obviously you're going to be touring at some point. Do you have something set up to promote this new release?
I'm not touring at this point to promote that, but I'm talking about it in interviews. I will be playing a few gigs in September with a new lineup of Vital Information.
Okay.
We'll be playing in Rhode Island and then 3 nights at Birdland in New York City. So
nice.
Those dates are listed on my vitalinformation.com website. But my agent is currently booking 2 tours for Vital Information for 2023. A West Coast tour in March and an East Coast tour in June. So we're talking about basically like a year from now.
Right.
But with COVID and getting canceled and musicians getting sick, I've been keeping a pretty low profile.
Yeah.
But I really like what you did during COVID when you started from the practice room.
Right.
That was fantastic because you really, I mean, you took advantage of the platform and say, listen, we can't, you guys can't tour. A lot of musicians weren't working, obviously, but at least you were still providing value and information to the drummers and out there and saying, hey, we could watch you and we can learn stuff and we can practice at home and watching you and stuff. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was something I felt I needed to do just to keep myself busy and creative.
Mm-hmm.
And it was rewarding because I do practice every day or almost every day. And I'm always working on new ideas. And I just thought, well, let's document some of this and put it out there and just keep some energy going, creative energy going for myself. And then, people responded and they enjoyed those videos.
Definitely.
That's great. So I wanted to ask you about the experience with Journey because it is a massive, I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like to be, you have to get into a van and you got to escape the stadium. I mean that whole thing. I've seen footage. I've seen some video footage and stuff. And it's what is that? Because you're really in a great position because you're able to you do Vital Information. You have this amazing work. It's your work. It's your passion. And then you have this other monster that kind of like that you were part of that kind of had this this life. What was that balance like for you? I mean, it must have been a tremendous.
Well, if you're talking about going all the way back to like 1978 to 85, when I was in Journey and we were in the process of writing music, recording albums, putting them out, and then going on tour, and just like it was a yearly cycle that would happen. So we would spend about 3 months at home, but working 5 days a week. So we lived. The band was based in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I moved. I had to move there, so I moved to. At first, I moved to Mill Valley, and we would rehearse in Oakland, California. So that it was like 20-minute, half hour. It was before like tons of traffic. It was not that bad of a commute. But we would go to a rehearsal hall and just jam and come up with songs by, someone would bring in a riff or a chord progression, or I would play a groove, or there'd be a bass line, and then and we would write music organically like that. Steve Perry would find melodies over the grooves and the riffs and chord progressions, and so the music developed quite organically with the 5 people in the room. And so our goal was to write an album. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, I mean, yes, we wanted songs that were popular and have them on the radio, but it's not, I don't ever feel like we were a band that was trying to write hit songs per se. We were trying to write a good album.
Right.
And so we knew we needed songs that would go on the radio, but we were trying to tell a story also, 10 songs that worked together and made sense. And we would rehearse a lot. And by the time we got to the studio, we were prepared so we could make an album in a fairly short time.
Wow.
We like a month or more, like maybe I don't remember exactly how long each record took, but they weren't like stretched out over a year or
right.
The things you hear about that came later.
Yeah.
Because then we had a tour, like our manager, Herbert, just like he already had his book, so we had deadlines, so it was very businesslike.
Yeah.
In that way, it's like we were creative, but we were focused, so we rehearsed 5 days a week, learned the music, went in the studio, made the record, and then go on tour. And things started slow. And when I first started in the band, the venue size was like it was theaters, 2,500 seat theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually we moved into small arenas. So like arenas being like 10, 15,000 up to 20,000. And eventually after Escape, the album Escape, that was the one that really took off. We were playing stadiums, that's like we're talking 40, 50, 60,000 people. So it happened slowly. So somehow I acclimated to it.
Yeah.
It is bizarre in a way. It's kind of stressful, and to step out on stage in front of all those people. But it was like this gradual thing that happened. Yet at the same time, I feel like I stayed quite grounded because I was still working with jazz, that were jazz musicians that I grew up with. And even if I had a little break from Journey, sometimes I'd go to Boston and we'd play a few gigs. Just in a little club. And that, so, my musical focus was wide.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I was deeply into being in Journey and having that work, but I was also playing with, like I said, with my friends from Boston. But I also then met a bunch of great jazz musicians in the Bay Area. And so, and you, John, you mentioned, you really loved Santana. Well, Tom Coster was like Santana and Journey, they are related because the original singer, organist, Greg Raleigh from the first incarnation of Santana left Santana and co-founded Journey with Neil Schon, and who was also playing in Santana in the early 70s.
That was like Woodstock years, right?
Yeah, actually, Neil came a little after Woodstock.
Right after that, yeah.
But in the early 70s. And they started Journey, and the keyboard player that took Greg Raleigh's place was Tom Coster.
Wow.
So Tom was a great jazz musician. And so he was in Santana for many years as a co-composer and producer. And then I met him, and I ended up playing in his band.
Wow,
so another thing that I was doing in the Bay Area. And then he's ended up in Vital Information. So you'll hear he's on the Global Beat record and the Fia Fiaga record.
That's amazing.
So I was keeping myself busy, doing a lot of different things and taking it all seriously, really putting in a lot of time to make sure I did a good job in every situation. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, so obviously the accomplishments with Journey as well. Talk a little bit about how it felt when you entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. That was an interesting experience. I didn't expect much of anything from it because it was not anything on my mind to ever be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Or, I never considered it a thing. But I knew about it, and I had seen some of the shows, and I didn't know what to make of it really. But when we got voted to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, of course, then, you know, became a big deal for us to get ready for it, you know. So we put together what we were going to play, a few songs, and had to, you know, get a speech together. But I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. But interestingly, my wife Diane and I, we showed up it was in Berklee. Is it Berklee Stadium?
Oh, Barclays Center.
Yeah, it was in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And so we showed up, and it was, you know, it was a pretty big to do, and and then the show started. Now, once the show started, it was actually one of the best shows I'd ever seen.
Wow.
It was so interesting. Like, you know, the sound was great. And so we were starting to get caught up in it. It was really, so it was like Electric Light Orchestra played.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Nice.
And then Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee and they inducted Yes.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right.
Geddy Lee played bass. And it was great. And actually backstage, I had a nice long conversation with Bill Bruford.
Oh, okay.
He was there. He was like, "What are you doing here?" Well, you know, from Journey, goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot you played with Journey." He was there getting inducted with Ted. So in the end, it was pretty exciting. And then to be, you know, to play for everyone and to be inducted. Right. It did feel like, you know, it was a pretty exciting thing. And so
that's so funny that you
cool. I felt really good about it, you know, as it was happening. So
right.
And we saw Joan Baez, and she was amazing. You know, Tupac got you know, that was his night. So there was a lot of great music. Wow. It was a good experience to be there.
It's so funny that you kind of thought it was going to be like a nice banquet with like a little dinner, a few speeches, and then you get a little ribbon,
right.
and then you walk out.
I did get a beautiful trophy.
Yeah, you got a nice.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah.
I think I have.
Oh, it was cool. Yeah, it was exciting.
I have a picture of you there holding it.
Oh yeah, there he is. Yep, exactly.
Love it. That's awesome. So it's 47 minutes we've been going. Wow. I feel like we've got so much. Our audience, like I said before, we usually try to bring guests that would inspire and let people know that there's, no matter what's happening right now, you know, the last 2 years have been challenging for everybody, especially artists that haven't, you know, bread and butter is when you go out to perform. And so there are artists out there now that I know some that are still kind of a little bit hesitant to get out there or even do something like this. Do you have any, you know, advice or something that you would, I know it's kind of a big question, but any kind of, you know, just thoughts that you would actually like to communicate to anyone out there that's kind of feeling a little bit of pressure, wanting to get out there again?
Well, I'm one of those people that have not really.
We are too.
Yeah, I miss playing with other musicians a lot. And when I first was experiencing staying off, you know, not being on tour, in some ways there was a certain relief to it. Because if I look back at my schedule, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I was working all the time with very little time at home. So so I found in some ways a relief to be at home, though I was still going on a lot of the energy that had been built up from years before. So when I started, like from the practice room, you know, I had a lot of ideas and a lot of energy. But as time went on, that energy dissipates.
Right.
You know, and now I'm having trouble myself, you know, staying really motivated.
Sure.
But I push myself to practice most days, because I do know eventually I'm going to be out there playing again.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the practicing, I like sometimes people, they ask me like about I practice even when I don't feel like it. Like what, why do I do that? It's because when I'm on tour, I don't necessarily feel like playing every night either.
Right.
I mean, realistically,
Yeah, sure.
For 6 months or even for a month, you don't always want to play every single night.
Right.
But you need the chops to do that. And the chops come from for me, the fact that I practice pretty much every day. So then you can access your best abilities even when you don't feel like it, because the chop of putting in that daily practice is there. So I do encourage people to practice every day or close. Like I do 6 days a week. I try to take Sunday off. Sometimes I'll take another day off, but I'll put in, an hour, 2, 3, not usually more than that. But I feel like it's important to keep my chops up, which that's hard to do without a lot of live playing. But I do work on that. And I give myself assignments, like if I have a good idea, I feel like it's a good idea, I'll write it out and then give myself variations of the idea, and then and work on it in a pretty organized way, because like I said, going back to when I first started taking those weekly lessons, one of the things I learned from the weekly lessons is, I have 6 days to work on this, and then I have my next lesson, and I don't want to disappoint my teacher.
Right. Exactly.
So there's this the chops of you get an assignment, you have the deadline, and you work on it, and then here you go. Now that happens in your professional life.
Sure.
You're going to have to learn these tunes, then we're going to have a recording session, or you're going to learn these tunes, and then we're going to go out on tour and play them. So that system that is in place, and it's good to keep it in place. And so somehow, like if you saw from the practice room, like some weeks I was working on the Charlie Wilcoxon book. Some weeks I was working on the new Steve Gadd book, Gaddamans, so even if it wasn't my idea, I just open up an old drum book that I had.
There you go.
And work. So that keeps me interested.
Yeah.
But it is hard. So I am looking forward. To playing some gigs. So having at least a few gigs or jam sessions or whatever. Hopefully, that is something that can give you that fuel that you need, that inspiration.
Absolutely. It's very inspirational also when you see, guys at your level who are still practicing all those hours, right? Because when we were younger, I know when I was younger, I was practicing 6-8 hours a day. And John and I have talked about this on the show, the mindset when it comes to wanting to be good at something, whatever it is, whether it's drums, guitar, or whatever it is, right? You may have to miss certain things. You may not be hanging out with the guys. You may be, and I had to miss a lot of stuff to sit, and John and I had to, work on stuff because we really wanted to get good. And then, when you get to a certain level, I mean, there's guys at your level that they don't practice at all. They just rely on the gigs, and the gig is their practice, but it's refreshing to see, guys like you who are, again, at your level that still really want to make sure that you're developing and getting better and keeping your chops up and that type of thing. It's very refreshing.
All right, good. It comes natural for me to want to practice. I enjoy the process, but I also find that you don't really get to the interesting stuff until you get past a certain physical point.
Yes.
And then more, dendrites are firing and ideas are happening.
Right.
And there's also a good reason to practice a lot, because once you practice every day, your chops start to go up. But the days you don't practice, actually, they kind of atrophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's say you go a few days without practicing, and then you practice for a day. I'm only going to get back a little bit to where I left off.
You were.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So then,
Yeah.
that's why maintenance is important, and then to go beyond is also like always moving forward. That's how it is for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Other drummers are different. They may not need that, but I do, and I enjoy it too.
And as one of the greatest drummers, I think it's also, going back to talking to people that are out there, I think it's also important that artists understand the importance that they have on the planet. And especially right now with the way the world is, I mean, artists are needed more now than ever. So, sometimes I know it's hard getting out there and trying to, but, it's needed. We need to destimulate this aggression that's happening across the planet. And the only way we can really do that is through art, is, the artists that are out there. So we are super excited that you are going to get back out there. And are you going to come through Nashville? Is that anything in the cards, please?
That's a good question. Usually the jazz tours don't go through Nashville.
I know. You can play here at my house. I'll make an amazing meal. I have ribs.
I do know there's some jazz clubs. I mean, Victor Wooten lives in Nashville. He told me there's some places where he plays down there.
Yes.
So hook me up.
There are some places. I'll find some places. I'll send them over to you.
Absolutely.
That's great. Steve, we want to thank you so much for being on. I mean, we're at an hour, and we really appreciate your time, your wisdom, your insight into music and into things that really a lot of us don't have that insight. So having you here has been really a pleasure, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us.
Yeah, it's been fun. And I'm glad you guys have this show. It's a great show.
Thank you.
Very far-reaching. Like I like all the different subjects and different guests that you get into.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And this is what we want to talk about. So Steve, hang out right there for a second. We're going to be right back. But thank you so much for being on, and we appreciate it. And we'll definitely be seeing again soon, hopefully in Nashville.
Okay. But in New York, definitely.
Yes, definitely. I will see
definitely
you.
In New York. Definitely in New York. All right. Hold on. Woo!
Wow. Everybody check out Steve and Vital Information. You will not be disappointed. What an amazing band.
Yeah, the website's on the screen there.
Absolutely.
Please check it out. This comes out actually. We're special, so we have it already, just so you know. I'm sorry, folks. But this comes out in 2 days. We got it 2 days early. I'm very excited to listen to this. So get out there and get your copy. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Appreciate y'all very much. We will see you all again next time. George, thank you very much as always. And for everybody here at Counterparts, me and George, want to thank you and see you all next week. And as always,